We're online. Ready to go, everybody? Who wants to get home before midnight? We're live, so here we go. Welcome to our electronic 2022 Plan and Budget Public Input Meeting on November 24th of 2021. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, the Regional Council is participating from home. Regional Chair Redmond and I are in Council chambers. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather virtually today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of their Indigenous people with whom we share the land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. I'd like to call upon our clerk to do the roll call.
Thank you, Councillor. Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Erb.
Present.
Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Councillor Galloway.
Present.
Councillor Harris.
Present.
Councillor Jaworski.
Here.
Councillor Jowett.
Here.
Councillor Kiefer.
Present.
Councillor McGarry.
Present.
Councillor Nowak.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Strickland.
Here.
Councillor Furmaniuk.
Present.
And we have regrets from Councillor Rentz.
Thank you. So I would also like to look to see if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. I am scanning the Zoom. Seeing none, I want to start by thanking all of the delegates who have come to tonight's meeting. Your presentations and perspectives are valued. Please don't feel offended if you don't get any questions from councillors. We will be taking notes. We have also received written correspondence and input through a number of different channels which we factor into our decision making. A quick reminder for myself and my colleagues before we begin. Tonight's meeting is a public input meeting, not a councillor input meeting. And in order to keep the meeting moving, if you have a question for a delegation, please make it brief and limit yourself to one question and one follow-up question. Any questions asked should be to the delegates and should be questions of clarification rather than debating a delegate. This is one of several important opportunities to hear from our community. The purpose of this meeting is to hear delegations in regards to the 2022 budget. No decisions will be made this evening. Delegations are allotted 5 minutes to speak. Groups have been allotted with 10 minutes, and anyone registered after the deadline has 3 minutes. There is a timer which will appear to council and participants in the council chamber window. I will provide the 1 minute reminder when your time is nearing completion. If you are watching this meeting via our live webcast and you would like to speak tonight, you can contact the regional clerk at regionalclerk@regionofwaterloo.ca, all lowercase, all one word. And you will be called at the end of the meeting. Anyone who registers during the meeting will be allotted the 3 minutes to speak. You can also register to speak at the final public input meeting on December 8th, or you can provide written comments after the meeting to, again, regionalclerk@regionofwaterloo.ca. I would now like to remind all of the delegations of some guidelines for participation in this evening's meeting. Please leave your video and camera turned off and your microphone and audio muted until you are called upon to speak. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting. Interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and hate speech or defamatory comments. I will now call upon the delegations as listed in the agenda. And our first delegation is Kristen, Thompson, Waterloo Region Community Legal Services, Reallocate Waterloo Region. Are you there? There she is.
I am, thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening. So my name is Kristen Thompson. I'm a lawyer at Waterloo Region Community Legal Services. We provide legal assistance to low-income community members in Waterloo Region. For the last year, the vast majority of my work has consisted of providing advice and representation to low-income tenants facing eviction through online hearings in front of the Landlord and Tenant Board. I'm here today to speak to you about reallocating funding from police services to the housing services budget. In my experience, most tenants face eviction for one of two reasons. The first, a tenant has fallen into rental arrears due to a change in financial circumstance and is no longer able to pay their full rent. Or, second, a tenant is experiencing a mental health or addiction concern and does not have access to proper supports that will help them maintain their tenancy. I would like to share two client stories with you. I have changed their names for privacy. My hope is that you will allocate resources toward affordable housing initiatives to individuals and families, along with supporting organizations and housing developments that assist those with mental health or addiction concerns. My first story is Laura's story. Laura has lived in her one-bedroom Kitchener apartment for 5 years. Laura is 61 years old. Her rent is $11.74 per month. She has a disability and her income is now through the Ontario Disability Support Program. ODSP gives her only $11.10 each month to pay for food, shelter, and all other living expenses. Each month, she consistently pays over $900 or 80% of her income towards rent. However, being about $250 short each month on rent adds up. At her landlord and tenant board eviction hearing last week, she owed over $3,000 in arrears. Her corporate landlord owns 60,000 units in Canada. We asked her landlord if they were willing to offer her another, more affordable unit. They were not, and nor are they legally obligated to. The rent bank, funded in part through the region, was unable to assist Laura because the unit is not sustainable. Rightly so, Laura will not be able to afford her full rent next month. Laura has not been able to find another unit and will face homelessness in the coming months. The board ordered her eviction for the end of January 2022. What Laura needs is a monthly rent supplement that will assist her in paying that extra $250 per month that she is short on rent. Many tenants in our community are assisted through rent supplement programs. However, the demand greatly outnumbers their availability. My next story is Cindy's story. At the beginning of November, I assisted Cindy at an eviction hearing. The landlord claimed she was substantially interfering with the landlord or other tenants. Cindy has a mental health disability. 2 to 3 times per year, she has an episode where she experiences reality in a different way. She needs medical assistance. Cindy is well supported by the Grand River Hospital Community Outreach Team. This team provides intensive service coordination to persons living with severe and persistent mental illnesses. The team is made up of a psychiatrist, occupational therapist, and other support workers. The team has done a great job in assisting Cindy to stay housed. She has been in her unit for 5 years now. However, the outreach team is only available during business hours and does not provide crisis services. If Cindy experiences an episode outside business hours, the landlord will now contact her parents or the police. Thankfully,
Kristen, that's
Cindy
the
has had
1-minute
positive
warning.
experiences with the
Thank you.
police while experiencing a mental health episode. In her own words, Cindy told me, "I need 24 hours support. Nighttime and weekends and holidays can be hard. Regarding the attempt eviction, I was humiliated. It was horrible and scary to think about being homeless. I was afraid. It made me sick to think about it. I was not dangerous. There are many more members in our community that could benefit from the same supports that Cindy has through the outreach team and similar programs. This support needs to be on a 24-hour basis. The mental health and addiction supports many tenants need can vary, but it includes increased funding and 24-hour funding of the impact team, which is between the Regional Waterloo Police and CMHA, increases to supportive housing, residential treatment programs, increased access to life skills programs. I often see evictions due to tenant-on-tenant conflicts. These programs would help tenants deal with conflict between neighbors. And finally, other assistance, including maintaining a unit or hoarding supports. In conclusion, I realize that housing supports come from all levels of government. I realize that there is no quick fix to the housing affordability crisis and the underfunding mental health and addiction sector. However, any additional resources provided by the region or reallocated from the police budget for rent subsidies and supporting these tenants with mental health and addictions concerns to stay housed would help make our community healthier, safer, and more inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Much appreciated. I'm going to look and see again. Thank you. There are no questions. Appreciate you coming out and speaking this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is David Trueman, co-chair of CycleWR Region, and budget considerations for cycling. There he is. Hi, David.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Let's get my presentation up, hopefully. And there we go. I'm going to race through this. 5 minutes is not very much. CycleWR, I think you are all familiar with by now. We've been busy over the last 18 months. You can see a few of the activities up here on this screen. Perhaps the newest news is that we are now incorporated as a not-for-profit corporation to better serve the community. The main focus of my presentation is on cycling to help meet the aims of Transform WR. Council, of course, adopted this plan in October 2019 unanimously. And the number one change that's called out by the plan is an emphasis on active transportation and transit. And two of the primary strategies are building a better, more connected network of safe cycling infrastructure and supporting the people that want to use that infrastructure. Cycling is the most efficient means of getting around in terms of greenhouse gases. It's more efficient even than walking, and certainly more efficient than transit, and 10 times more efficient than electric vehicles. And just to point out, 49% of our emissions are in the transportation sector, so it's the place we need to tackle. We're very grateful for the excellent infrastructure that the region has built recently. Things like the Market Trail, Victoria Street Mutts, and the Franklin McQueen Shaver Trail. But this pace of improvement will not get us there. We need to get this 50% reduction by 2030, and we have to move faster to get there. Cycling is one of the few short-term strategies that will actually yield results, within 5 years, and certainly much more within 10 years. If you look at a map of KW, and I apologize that Cambridge is not on here, please be assured that we are working very actively on Cambridge, and you'll be hearing about that in the future. If we look at just AAA, all ages and all abilities infrastructure in KW, on the left, you can see it's a very sparse map of disconnected segments. And on the right, you can see what you would see if you were a motor vehicle driver. Obviously, a comprehensive network, fully connected of different types of roads all over the region. And this is the problem, of course. We are playing catch up with active transportation. And as I say, we can't get there with the pace we're going now. So what do we say? How do you fund this improvement in the pace? Certainly don't take away from important social issues like homelessness and mental health supports, equity, reconciliation, and so many other important issues. Just reallocate money within the transportation budget. We suggest that you reallocate a substantial portion of the current road budget, both capital and operating budget, and move staff into active transportation, at least double the staff for planning a significant number of new projects in active transportation. Forget about painted bike lanes. They will not yield any benefit for the 60% of the population who won't feel safe in that kind of an environment. We have a few specific suggestions. One is a hot fix budget. This was recommended in the 2014 Active Transportation Master Plan, and as far as I know, has never been implemented. It's
You
about
have 1
fixing
minute
all the
left, David.
small gaps in the network and giving the staff the leeway they need, the discretionary spending so that they can fix these things quickly. You know, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. We need transparent report on progress against the goals in TransformWR in general and active transportation in particular. So we're proposing a cycling dashboard, and you can see some specific suggestions on here. It should probably go quite a bit further. You know, this is an image from BC. I'd like to say we've reached the end of the road of talking about climate action. We have to act, and cycling infrastructure is a key way of acting. And just a reminder, municipal political leaders who push cycling infrastructure heavily do get reelected. Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming out this evening. Councillor McGarry.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, it takes a second or two to find the button to flip your hand up, so please be patient. Thank you very much, David, for coming in and talking through this. I was just going to actually just ask some clarification over your public measuring. I've always believed that in any given project that we're doing, we should have sort of an evaluation piece. So my question of clarification really is regarding the public, like the cycling dashboard. What kind of components would you expect to see on a well put together dashboard? And I would assume that you think that it should be at the regional website level?
Yes. So some components would include budget and actual spend on an annual basis. Other items would be measures like kilometers of AAA infrastructure completed on a per municipality basis, both the total cumulative to date and the amount completed this year. I think we should be doing an annual survey of attitudes on cycling for both cyclists and non-cyclists. Like what are drivers currently thinking about cyclists on the road? And has it improved over the last year? There could be a very simple measure like how many signs do we have of bike lane ends here? We should be looking at reducing that number every year, because that's a horrible thing to run into when you're out cycling. We could have the number of leading pedestrian and bike interval signals in the city. So, you know, the number of cross rides completed. There are so many different things. Obviously, there'd have to be just some discussion on what's most important.
Thank you so much. No further questions, Madam Chair.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much for coming out this evening, David.
Thank you.
We'll move to our next delegation, and it's a group. It's Paige, Monck-Whipp, Network Catalyst, Jean Becker, a founding member of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Advisory, Advocacy Circle, Wellbeing, Waterloo Region, 2022. Funding. Who do we have represent? Hello, Paige. There you are.
Hi there.
Please
Hi,
proceed.
thanks so much for having me. I think Jean is just getting logged in. So, okay, I do see Jean there now as well. So I will share my screen here and we'll get started. So thank you everyone for having me here today. I'm the backbone staff member with Wellbeing Waterloo Region and here with Jean Becker, who is a founding member of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Advisor and Advocacy at Wellbeing Waterloo Region Resources. And we are here to discuss Wellbeing's 2022 funding request and really appreciate the recommendations that came through Council earlier today that I believe were approved. So just to remind you of who we are and why we're here, we are a cross-sectoral collaborative focused on making transformative change in well-being. And we're here to work together to improve well-being in ways that we can't do alone. Of course, we require funding to continue the journey that we've all started together. And our foundation is connected community, equity, and measurement. These have really been through lines in all of the work that Wellbeing Waterloo Region has done since it started and the framework for everything that we do. And we use the CARE model to describe what we do and how we do it. Because the idea of well-being is complex. It's influenced by a wide variety of conditions and systems in which individuals and communities are born, work, grow, live, and age. And we know that no single organization, government, or program can tackle these complex systems to impact community well-being. So as a network of community members, organizations, businesses, and governments, Wellbeing uses this CARE model to strengthen the social fabric across Waterloo Region in order to work together to improve well-being. So we're a little bit different than a traditional collective impact initiative, although we have come together over collective impact areas such as affordable housing. And it's really important that we have an evaluation framework to know that we're moving in a good direction, to know that the CARE model is making a difference. And we do have plans to work with the Tamarack Institute in the new year to actually be able to evaluate the CARE model. So this is just a snapshot of how we've been funded over the years. We're currently receiving funding from Ontario Health West into March of 2022, but continued funding is not guaranteed. And as you can imagine, there's really significant challenges to having inconsistent funding. So our goal is a sustainable blended funding model that's not reliant on any one funder. I want to specifically recognize the role that the region of Waterloo has played, both as a founder of Wellbeing Waterloo Region and also as a really critical partner in keeping our operations going. The region supported Lori Fiozzi, who is the former manager of strategic planning and strategic initiatives, part-time in her role to Wellbeing Waterloo Region, and that was really critical to move Wellbeing forward to where we're at now. But I can attest that this is definitely a full-time job. So as our host organization, the region has been our fiscal agent. They've provided many, many generous in-kind supports, which currently include one part-time staff member in kind, hopefully soon to be another, back office support and office space, other needed resources and infrastructure. And because we're a community collaborative, we're not an incorporated entity, the region's also been a financial partner in our grant applications to help us secure funding. So we're designed as a collaborative working outside the traditional systems. So we've been generously hosted by the region, but we are designed and we're intended to be working differently. So I'm going to nerd out about systems theory here for just a second, because Wellbeing is really aiming to make transformative change, which is not quick or easy work. Having 2 years of funding will really help provide us some sustainability, which Wellbeing hasn't really had, and allow us to focus on reinvigorating the network. You know, it's been said that there's no broken systems because every system is perfectly designed to be getting the results that it gets. So when we're seeing inequitable outcomes, which of course we are from our systems, it's because there's things in our systems that are causing those inequities. So if we imagine a system as an iceberg, the things that shape the structure of the system are at the bottom. They're hardest to see. We don't even necessarily know that they're there. And we call these mental models as one word for it, and referring to the values, beliefs, and assumptions that are shaping the system. So white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, the belief in individualism, that individuals should be able to just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. All of those things work to shape the systems and produce those inequitable outcomes. So it's really important to understand the mental models that are shaping the system. A consultant that we worked with for a lot of our training, Kika Ojo Thompson, describes these as powerful unexamined ideas and says that by reflecting on these powerful unexamined ideas that form our worldview and the bias they instill, this can either block or unlock the full potential of our neighborhoods and community members. So we know in order to change outcomes, we really need to fundamentally change the components and the structures that are causing the systems to behave in a certain way. And that's these mental models or these powerful unexamined ideas. And that's a really critical leverage point to affecting systems change. We know that no one group can do this alone. No one group can be responsible for this. It's too complex, it's too intricate, and we're a large region. So there's many different approaches across Waterloo Region. Because Wellbeing is a large, diverse, cross-sectoral network, there's a really broad ripple effect across the region when we can come together across different sectors, different communities, different lived experiences to be able to challenge these ideas. And I do want to talk about sustainability planning because I know this was part of the staff report recommendations. And as Councillor Galloway mentioned earlier this evening, 2 years is not a lot of time. So the really great news is that we've already started working towards this. 2 years of core funding provides us with some stability during this time. We're reinvigorating the network and our focus. We've also been convening a sustainability group and financial futures group with Wellbeing Waterloo Region network members who have years and years of expertise in this area. We've applied to work with the WLU MBA program, which would allow us to have a cohort of students for 6 months who would really be looking at developing a sustainability plan for a collaborative like us, which is not not kind of standard in terms of funding. We have grant applications out. It's something we're always looking at, different philanthropic funders as well. And we understand that traditional funding models might not be the right fit for us as a collaborative. So we're very open to alternative funding models. We want to make sure what works best for Wellbeing Waterloo Region. So just before I flip it over to Jean Becker here tonight to share, the importance and the impact of well-being in supporting the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Advisory and Advocacy Circle, I just want to highlight the importance of an appreciation for this funding, for unrestricted funding, because while a core of our work is measurement to ensure that we're moving in a good direction, it's really important that we have the room to grow and evolve and listen to community energy. And I think that, nothing was a better lesson for that than the pandemic. So I will flip it over to Jean Becker now.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to attend this evening and to speak to you. I was asked to come and just spend a few minutes of your time expressing my thoughts about the importance of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit circle that has been under the Wellbeing Waterloo region for the last several years. I really want to emphasize that this has been a really important way of bringing our community together. And I think that perhaps many of you know that the Indigenous community in Waterloo region has not had much of a voice over these years that, I've been in this area myself for almost half a century now. And we have struggled, I have to say, to come together as a community. We have struggled to have a voice in some of the decision making in the community. And we have been doing a lot of grassroots, as they say, work to maintain connections within the community, but never having many resources or opportunities. And the group that was created under the region has really been very successful, I will tell you, in terms of bringing together some really disparate voices and creating a space where we have all been able to come and express. So as a collaborative, the word that Paige kept using, I think that it has been more successful than anything that I have participated in over the past half a century. And I would really hate to see it disappear. I feel that it's such an important way that, and I think that having it under a regional sort of organization has been very helpful. And it does give us a place to have where we meet together, and then we can look at some of the broad issues that are affecting our community. And so, for instance, this group was very important in addressing the concerns around vaccinations for the Indigenous community in our region.
And
they
Jean,
did a lot of work
so
to
can I ask you to wrap up?
make sure that we were included in how that was rolled out and then in rolling it out. So that's just one example of some of the work that's been done, and probably the most recent example that I could give you. So I won't go on and on anymore, but thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for the support that you have been providing for us in the last few years.
Thank you to you both for coming in today. We really appreciate you taking the time to delegate, and it's been very nice to see you both again. So once again, thank you. I don't see any questions, so you can certainly stay on or depart, but much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is Isabella Stefanescu, Director of Wired World Incorporated, with regard to CKWR 98.5 FM, our community radio station. Hi, Isabella.
Good evening. Thank you very much for letting me address council. I will share my screen. I have a very short presentation, and then we'll be on our way. So I'm here to talk about our community radio station. You probably know me from other presentations. I was before council to talk about Globe Studios. Also a past chair of the Kitchener-Waterloo Arts Fund, and I was a board member for a long time and generally involved in the arts community. So I was asked this October to join the board of our community radio station in order to kind of help it grow and recover from the body blow it received during COVID. For those who don't know, Wild World Incorporated was founded in 1971 with a mandate to advance education and expand the scope and integrity of information and artistic expression in Waterloo region. So, CKWR 98.5 FM went on air in 1973. So Wild World is 50 years this year. The radio station will have been on air 50 years in a couple of years. It was the first community radio station in Canada. As a broadcaster, it's deemed an essential service. And it broadcasts 18 hours of programming a day, 7 days a week. Out of this, 66 hours of a week are community programming. I shall elaborate a bit on this figure because it actually takes about 3 days of work to make 1 hour of community broadcast. So in fact, the total contribution of volunteers who produce these programs is over 10,000 hours. And I calculated at $20 an hour, fairly conservative. It's over $200,000 that these volunteers contribute to the radio stations. The programs are broadcast in 12 languages. There are programs that are broadcast in 12 languages, also spoken word, cultural programming, and the signal reaches in all corners of Waterloo region. You have a picture here. The tower is kind of on an off Herb Street between Waterloo and St. Agatha. And this is how far the signal goes. It covers all of Waterloo region and beyond, and reaches approximately 1 million people. So how does Wired World do it? It's a lean and mean little organization. It has 3 part-time positions, 2 contract positions, 69 volunteers, a very dedicated board, both the present and the past board, and it's funded by sales, fundraising, and occasional grants. Here's what happened to the station during COVID. Just like everybody else, people were locked down, we had to work from home. But what really hit the radio station was that in 3 days, it lost 70% of its revenue. At the time, there was a very heartfelt letter from the then chair of the board, Peter Beacock, to all the leaders in the community. And fortunately, we are now on the road to recovery. First of all, the federal government helped the station, and we received COVID emergency assistance, which saw us over the hump. But sales rebounded, volunteers kept volunteering, making programs from their homes.
Isabella,
and most
that's
important,
the 1 minute mark.
CRTC. renewed the license for 7 years. So what I want to emphasize, and perhaps I will finish with this, is some extracts from the regional strategic plan, which you've probably already seen this afternoon. But I want to draw your attention that funding organizations like ours and many other organizations, arts and culture community that receive such a body blow from COVID-19 is urgent and very much needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabella. Much appreciated for coming out this evening to delegate. I see no questions, so I'm prepared to call the next delegation, which is a group. Rachel Jones, Elizabeth Robertson, with regard to requests for an increase on our police budget. There you guys are. Hello.
Hi, thanks. Thank you. So thank you. Good evening. My name is Elizabeth, and this is my friend Rachel. And we really appreciate the time you're taking to listen to those you represent this evening. We are both students at University of Waterloo who call the region our home. This term, we had the chance to take a course together on the topic of trauma and healing, and our classes are very discussion-based. This past week, our class discussed the role of policing in the realm of trauma and healing, and this helped us gain understanding about the importance of proactively breaking cycles of violence to prevent further violent harms. Through these discussions, we were encouraged to think of ways to help victims of crime and circumstance in ways that mitigate the use of force whenever possible. Learning how trauma can be perpetuated through cycles of violence helped me understand the importance of implementing crime intervention as far upstream as possible. Whenever discussion of crime and harm arises, I now find myself asking the question, where did this originate from? And where did that originate from? I really believe that keeping a community safe starts with addressing the root cause of a crime. Therefore, the most effective interventions are those that prevent the crime from happening, rather than those that can only react after someone has been victimized. That being said, we are not naive. We know that people are hurting themselves and others in the present, and these situations require a response. However, as we and so many others before us have said, we know the importance of upstream intervention, including basic housing and social supports, in order to really get the sources of violence in our region. So we are challenging you to think about what you want the region to look like in 5 years and in 15 years. Do we want to keep playing catch up by reacting to issues like houselessness, opioids, and trafficking? Or do we want a future where such issues are a striking rarity? We believe that saying no to further increases of the policing budget is the first step in allocating funds to the health and safety of our future community. The reallocation of the current police budget could also have the desired effect of freeing up resources to target the issues our region faces. We have heard that an official report on potential upstream interventions is in the works, and we are really excited to learn more about the ways that funding can specifically target upstream interventions in areas such as mental health and gun violence, as well as drug use and treatment programs. Now, the regional budget exists because there are finite funds to be distributed for the health and well-being of our community. We recognize that you do not control budgeting for all of the region's mental and physical health resources. So by using funds to support local organizations and their programs and initiatives, fewer cases may escalate again to this reactive stage. And so more resources will be available for responding to the violence facing our region. Therefore, in saying no to the proposed policing budget, we also encourage you to say yes to crime prevention as a larger component of the region's crime response. With a new police station being built and the potential budget increase seeing more officers being hired, I'm not optimistic that the police budget would naturally shrink in the next few years. Instead, a budget increase now will continue to affect the availability of funds for other services in the future. However, if we instead use this $12.4 million police budget increase to reverse House of Friendship's impending shelter closure, or to construct the Unified Indigenous Community Hub in downtown Kitchener, we lay the foundation for a future of safety and well-being.
Now, we know that violent crime is on the rise, and that can feel scary. Gun violence and human trafficking are alarming. Sometimes, when we're afraid, it feels like all we can do is react to the problem at hand. To keep our community safe and to do as much as we can to address the issues, though, it is incredibly important to have both reactive and preventative strategies. That way, we can address harms when they happen and also prevent other harms from happening in the first place.
Therefore, we call on you to balance these strategies proportionally, allocating funds to where they are needed most. For example, consider the proportion of health-related incidents that police respond to, which could be prevented and resolved by professionals who are actually trained in this area, compared to the proportion of violent incidences which may require some level of force, and allocate funds accordingly. Once again, we recognize that you do not control all of the budgeting that affects our region. Therefore, to all of our excited ramblings, our request is simple. Stand against policing as an even larger portion of the region's finite funds, and save these funds for upstream interventions and the needs of those currently marginalized in our community.
Because even if the police department fulfills its duties perfectly, it's still at most only half the solution. It cannot prevent the problems that we are concerned about in our communities. I think you recognize this as well, because I'm watching the previous public input meeting. I heard many of you talk about wanting to find a balance between the upstream services and policing. However, when I look at the budget, I see a huge imbalance, with significantly more resources being spent on the reactive side. Let me show you what I mean. In 2021, 35.5% of property taxes of residents of Waterloo Region went towards funding reactive services, policing and paramedics. On the other side, on the side of prevention, I'm going to be generous and include housing services, income support, public health, cultural services, children's services, planning, development, and legislative services, libraries, and the Waterloo Crime Prevention Council. All of these preventative services combined make up only 16% of what our property taxes are used for. That's less than half of what's used for reactive services. I understand that other levels of government subsidize some of these services, meaning that this does not represent the entirety of the funds that go towards these preventative services. However, we want to highlight the drastic imbalance here. 31.9% to policing and 0.1% to the Crime Prevention Council. These are the numbers that we have control over, and we ask that you take action to make the budget just a little bit more balanced. As you're making budget decisions in these next weeks, we challenge you again to imagine what you want the region to look like in 5 years, in 15 years. Where do you want the region to be in terms of mental health crises, drug overdoses, gun violence? What can you do with the budget right now to work towards achieving that? If we want fewer drug overdoses, fewer mental health crises, and less gun violence, we should be investing in addiction services, mental health services, community cultural centers, and affordable housing. I think we can all agree that we want to have upstream services because we want a world in which the issues are prevented, not just responded to. And so we ask you to act on this, to say no to the proposed police budget, to ask the police department to continue operating on an unchanged budget, and to allocate the available resources to preventative services. This may take more time, but if you value crime prevention, this is what needs to happen. Together, we can work towards achieving a more balanced approach to crime prevention and community well-being. Thank you, councillors.
Well, thank you very much, ladies. Very well done. Thank you for taking the time to come out and see us this evening and share your thoughts. Very intelligent thoughts, by the way, so thank you. I don't see any questions today, so once again, thanks for coming out this evening. And I'll call upon our next delegation. Nancy Regehr, Board Chair of the Grand Philharmonic Choir. Are you there? There you are, Nancy. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As you said, I'm the chair of the Grand Philharmonic Choir, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you about the proposed elimination of annual funding for the choir. We are grateful for the annual funding from the region. Predictable annual operating funding is key to ensuring the financial stability of organizations such as the choir. The Grand Philharmonic Choir has been providing and hopes to continue providing music education and enriching choral experiences for children, youth, and adults in this region and should continue to receive an annual operating grant. The reason given for proposing to eliminate the grant to the choir is that the choir does not fit into any funding stream. As a core cultural institution in this region, the choir should be in the key cultural institutions stream with the KW Symphony and the museum, a funding stream that provides core operating grants. While it's true that the budgets of the KW Symphony and the museum are much higher than the choirs, I am not aware of any choir in Canada, certainly in a region of this size, that has regular annual income that comes close to $1 million in operations, an amount that was suggested to us as a benchmark for inclusion in the key cultural institution stream. We actually are not aware that this was ever adopted by Regional Council as a funding criteria. The Grand Philharmonic Choir is one of the oldest cultural institutions in the region, with origins in the 19th century. The KW Symphony was actually founded in 1945 to accompany the KW Philharmonic Choir, now the Grand Philharmonic Choir. Next year, the choir will celebrate 100 years of continuous operation since 1922. We are thrilled to be collaborating with the Regional Museum to mount an exhibit in fall 2022 to celebrate this rich choral music history and its significance in this region. The Grand Philharmonic Choir is one of the few choral organizations in Canada with adult, youth, and children's choir in the organization. To our knowledge, there is no other region in Canada of this size with such a family of choirs. The choir makes a significant contribution to this community. Music education and training are a key focus, and we do not turn choristers away because of their inability to pay choir fees. We are grateful to the Center in the Square for providing office space at low cost, and we plan our concert season so we perform in the Center in the Square with the KW Symphony, which in pre-pandemic years was 3 of the 4 concerts in our main concert series. We provide concert experiences that highlight important issues such as Edward Bertinsky's photography of industrial landscapes to highlight the environmental devastation of our planet. Considering Matthew Shepard, a piece about an American student who was beaten, tortured, and left to die because he was gay. Annalise, a choral work based on the diary of Anne Frank, the young Jewish girl who died of typhus in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in 1945. We were thrilled in 2017 to collaborate with St. Jerome's University, Conrad Grebel University College, University of Waterloo, the Catholic Diocese of Hamilton, the Regions Arts Fund, and corporate sponsors to perform Handel's Messiah to a full house at Center in the Square with animated digital images from the St. John's Bible projected on the screen and also live streamed to Kitchener City Hall for the community. We also support community events such as the Chris Kindle Market, singing in seniors' residences, farmers markets, and local businesses, and invite community members to sing with us or come to music sound walks in local conservation areas. In May 2019, the board approved a 5-year strategic plan with 4 focus areas: artistic excellence and innovation, education and training, outreach and audience development, and organizational sustainability and vibrancy. The pandemic interrupted that planning and forced us to pivot and move to online programs. But those programs actually did advance our strategic goals. Our artistic team, led by Mark Vernon, and our administrative team, led by Louisa D'Amato, did an outstanding job of keeping our choristers connected, inviting former choristers to weekly sessions, including community members and online events, providing virtual training, education, and fun programs, initiating collaborations with choirs and artists across Canada internationally, and premiering the commissioned work, Take This Thread with Music and Text by a Canadian composer and a Canadian poet. I respectfully ask you to vote to maintain the choir's annual operating grant. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. I see no questions. Sorry. Oh my goodness. I can't see those at all. Sorry, Councillor Bennett, you are first.
Thanks, thanks, Chair Jowett, and thanks, Ms. Regehr, for coming in tonight and speaking so passionately about the Grand Phil. I guess a two-part question that I'd like to ask you. First of all, just, when you talk about sort of core cultural institutions, I'm really wondering if you can touch on really the historic links between yourselves and the Symphony and to a certain degree, I guess, also the Center and the Square, but how, the three of you are intertwined and really rely on each other for each other's success is part one of the question. And part two, just having been through the pandemic and, still coming out the other end of it, how important has from your perspective is vocal music in terms of the health and well-being of the community and those you serve?
Okay, thank you very much for those questions. As I touched on in my comments, there is a synergy or certainly a very strong relationship between Center and the Square, the choir, and the Symphony. Historically, as I mentioned, the Symphony actually was formed to accompany the choir. I mean, I don't have a experience myself with the choir. It's more like a decade, but in terms of being on the board. But as I said again in my comments, when we plan the season, the Symphony is an integral part of it. Certainly 3 out of the 4. And in our anniversary year, we actually plan to have all 4 concerts in the Center and the Square with the Symphony, so that there is a very strong relationship there. It's a very important one. With the adult choir, it's a symphonic choir, and it really does need the Symphony to produce the kind of music that we like to give to the community. So I don't, and of course, we're very pleased that the Center and the Square has provided some office space for us, which is also wonderful. I don't know if that answers your question on the relationship. There may be others coming up, like I see Mark. I think Mark Vernon is on is one of the people going to speak. You could certainly speak to him as the artistic director a bit more about that relationship between the Center and the Symphony.
So, certainly that's very helpful. Thank you. And on the second part?
The second part, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. The second part was really just the importance of vocal music during a time like we've been through and from a quality of life point of view in any community.
Yeah. Well, some of this is going to be coming a bit from personal experience, my own personal point of view. But for me, choral music is, to me, it speaks to my soul. Like certainly orchestral music does as well, but for me, choral music is very special in that way. Partly the sound of human voices, as well as the text that is part of that singing. So just based on the comments that we've received from supporters and subscribers and people that we've worked with, people are very anxious to get back to in-person concerts and actually experiencing the choir again. We recently had a walk in Columbia Forest, and the sounds and the human voice is something very special. It exists in every culture. Every culture really is a singing culture.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I will just note that earlier today, as we were in budget, we did ask staff for final budget day to bring back a indication of how we could return some of the dollars that are being contemplated to be taken out of the granting budget and to bring that back for council's consideration on budget day. So I'm hopeful we'll be able to come up with a solution for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Furmaniuk. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, through you, Chair.
What a wonderful, wonderful group you are. Your living history, your connection to the past, and so providing and bringing forth to the present and the future. I look forward to your 100th year.
Thank you. We do too.
Thanks again for coming in this evening, Nancy. We much appreciate your presentation. I'll be looking for the next delegation, which would be David Taylor, Grand Philharmonic Choir. Are you there, David? There you are, David. Oh, that's quite the scenery behind you.
Yes, I'm afraid it's Norway, not Canada.
No, it's quite pretty.
So I'm David Taylor, and I very much enjoy attending concerts. I'm a longtime supporter and subscriber, not just of the Grand Philharmonic Choir, but also the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony, and since its inception, Orchestra G Waterloo. I serve on the board of the choir, and I'm currently the choir treasurer. As has already been mentioned, the choir is important in the history of Waterloo Region, with our roots going back into the 19th century. I'd like to focus, though, more on what's happening today. I personally believe that there's significant value in performing the great works of the choral literature, works like Handel's Messiah and the Bellows Works. We also do much more than that. As Nancy has already alluded to, and my apologies, by the way, that I'll be repeating a few of the things Nancy said, has already mentioned some of the contemporary works. I'd just like to mention again the work concerning Matthew Shepard, based on the murder of a young gay man. And I'd also like to mention that that was in fact the Canadian year of that work. And in addition to what I've just described, which are performances by the main adult choir and the chamber choir, we, as you know, have a children's choir and a youth choir. And those only help to provide an opportunity for performance by individuals in those age groups. They also help to provide a musical education, and I believe a very high quality musical education for the participants in those choirs. However, what we do isn't simply performance and training. We also commission works, which Nancy referred to very briefly. We have for a number of years been holding a composition competition, where each year we request a work that is aimed at performance by one of our choirs, rotating through the family of choirs year by year. We have continued the competition each year, even during the pandemic, but while we haven't been able to perform in-person concerts. As a result of that, we expect that in our All Choirs concert coming up in March, we will actually be performing a total of 4 works that we commissioned, 3 for the composition competition and another one I'll mention in just a moment. All of the works I've just been talking about are fairly short, but for the coming centennial season, we have commissioned a major work that will be a significant part of our season. I believe that as a result of the work we do, that we also provide recognition for Waterloo Region across the country. The composition competition clearly does that, making us known to young composers across the whole country. Something Nancy referred to fairly briefly was that in the context of the pandemic, where we were unable to perform or rehearse except virtually, we realized that was an opportunity to work with choirs that normally are so far away that we couldn't work with them because we couldn't come together to provide an in-person concert. And so, having come up with the basic idea, we were able to find 4 other choirs from across the country that wanted to work with us on the project, from Edmonton, from Montreal, and 2 from Halifax. And while all 5 choirs participated, the work was very much centered here, and we arranged for the commission of a new work, which became Take This Thread, Le Fille que je suis. And what we had to do was to take performances by, I think, 200 singers roughly, and stitch them together. And we engaged the services of a professional audio editor and a professional video editor to produce something that I believe is really very high quality, both artistically and technically. And after its premiere in June, we've made that available on YouTube for people to continue to view and listen to it. I think that our synergy with the KWS, something that Nancy was being asked about just a few moments ago, is very significant. As she said, in a typical season, 4 of 4 concerts by the main adult choir are in 3 cases accompanied by the symphony.
Warning,
as well as that, while it is less consistent from year to year, typically the KW Symphony will engage us to perform a choral component of their concerts for about the same number each year. And I think that's very significant in the two organizations working together. If we should lose the funding the region has been giving us, it's not going to cause the choir to cease operations, but doing more with less is a fiction. And we will have to find some way of reducing or eliminating some of the things we do, all of which I think are really quite important. And so in summary, the choir provides a variety of high quality musical performances for Waterloo Region audiences. It provides musical training for children and youth. It supports Canadian composers, and it helps to make Waterloo Region known as culturally important in other parts of Canada. I think it's fully deserving of continuing recognition as a key cultural institution and of receiving stable core funding from the region. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. We have one question from the floor. Councillor Galway, please.
Thanks, Mr. Taylor, for delegating tonight. First of all, I just wanted to say that I did greatly enjoy the walk in the woods a couple of weeks ago in the Beechwood Forest with the Grand Phil. It was quite remarkable in that particular setting. But as the treasurer, I'm curious, what percentage of the operating budget does this represent? I suspect it's fairly small.
Of course, if you look at this year or last year, the budget is all out of whack because of the pandemic. But pre-pandemic, we were operating with a roughly balanced budget at approximately $400,000 of income and expenses. And so this represents 8%, which is enough to make a significant difference to our operations.
And so is the region's money identified for any particular purpose, or is it just a core support for the operations of the Grand Phil?
Yes, it is core support. So we use it to just pay the salaries of our artistic and support staff and so on. We do get project funding from various sources, including occasionally from the Regional Arts Fund. But for example, we got project funding from the Canada Council for Take This Thread, get continuing funding from them. And continuing funding is of course important to provide us with a base that then allows us to reach out and launch individual projects that we can seek special funding for.
Okay, thanks very much, David.
Thank you, David. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is Sean Simpson. Hi, Sean. Please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and regional councillors. Last time I spoke to council, I did so in my professional capacity as VP of Ipsos in Toronto, where I've worked for the last 15 years. However, today I address you as a citizen of Kitchener, the city where I have lived my whole life, where I went to school, and where I've recently purchased a home downtown, just a stone's throw away from council chambers, actually. One of the reasons why I choose to keep Waterloo Region as my home is because of the rich arts community that thrives here. I was distressed to learn that the regional staff have recommended to council that the Grand Philharmonic Choir's ongoing grant be terminated effective immediately. I humbly submit that this recommendation not be approved by regional council. The fundamental question before council is whether the region should consider the GPC a pillar of the community worthy of consistent funding. There is no doubt in my mind that the choir is indeed a cultural pillar of the region, deserving of the public's ongoing support. It's the oldest arts organization in the region. It's the only symphonic choir, and it's the only arts organization that has consistent, inclusive, accessible programming for citizens aged 7 to over 77, and one which reaches out and gives back to the broader community. Further, it continued programming throughout the pandemic and found new ways to engage with its members and the community when many other organizations paused their activities. Others will share facts and statistics about the choir, but I'd like to share with you my personal story, as this is one that is emblematic of so many of my friends and colleagues who have been a part of this extraordinary organization. I began singing with the children's choir at the age of 10 and continued to sing in the youth choir into my 20s, at which point I joined the adult choir and the board of directors. As a member of the children and youth choirs, I made many friends and even found my eventual wife, Amy DeBrone. The choir afforded me opportunities to develop my musicianship skills as an accompanist and assistant conductor, and those skills are still put to good use. I share those musical talents with the community by serving as director of music at St. Anne's Church in Kitchener, where I have been organist and choir director for 21 years. In his book called Bowling Alone, Robert Putnam argues that social capital is declining because people are not participating in organized activities that connect them to other households that may not be or look the same as their own. Here at the GPC, we are bucking that trend and bringing together diverse peoples united in a common objective: to create beautiful art through song to share with the community. The children's and youth choirs have been a caring, welcoming, accessible place for hundreds of children over the years. It was a home, a place where we all fit in for love of music and a vehicle for sharing that music with others. It provided skills instruction and so many other tangible benefits for young people. So many who came in as awkward kids and teenagers left for school to be doctors, lawyers, tradespeople, academics, and other professionals. The choir taught us what it was like to be in a family, to work hard, and to share the fruits of our labor with the community. It forged us and prepared us to be positive contributors to Waterloo Region. That which I experienced continues today in the work of the children's and youth choirs, who have a special focus on inclusion and accessibility. I fear that such a significant reduction in our stable funding would mean that we couldn't afford all of the instruction, activity, or performances in which we engage across all three levels of the choir. Given that we are a lean and financially prudent organization, most of the expenses that the choir undertakes in any given year are spent on renting the center and the square, other local facilities, and in hiring the KW Symphony. In short, the funds we receive from the region are put back into the region in a type of circular arts economy.
So, Sean, that's the 1 minute warning, okay?
Thank you. The GPC is about to embark on its 100th anniversary, a joyous, memorable occasion to mark the rich choral history of Waterloo Region. Such a large and sudden reduction in our funding would no doubt have an impact on our operations and our ability to engage with the community during our centenary, when in fact we should be looking for ways to engage even further. I implore you to consider the negative impact of staff's recommendation to cut the backbone of the GPC's budget. The region's continued funding allows the choir to offer a home to children and youth who are exploring their creativity and identity through music. In my opinion, and in my direct experience, the region's investment in the GPC specifically yields dividends that are immeasurable for the community, and it is a pillar of this community. Thank you for your time and for your thoughtful consideration.
Thank you, Sean. You've got three excellent timing, much appreciated. I see no questions. Once again, I thank you for joining us. Our next delegation is Stephen Furmaniuk. I hope I've got that right, Stephen. Are you there, Stephen?
I am, yes, thank you. Furmaniuk, that's perfect.
Welcome, please proceed.
Thank you very much. I am speaking to you today, and first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about the budget for the year. As was said, my name is Stephen Furmaniuk. I live in the Victoria Park neighborhood of Kitchener, where I've lived for over 10 years now. I'm not speaking to you as a representative of a particular group or anything. I'm just a guy, but I felt really compelled to speak about the budget and funding priorities, especially when it comes to the proposed increase to the police service budget. Living where I live, I see firsthand the dramatic issues with homelessness, mental health, and anti-Indigenous racism that badly require continued and further investment from the region. I witnessed the racism faced by the Landback camp when they were located in Victoria Park last year. I followed their struggles with vandalism and abuse online and in the media, including just this past weekend, an incident of vandalism to Bungishimo Johnston's art installation on the land in Waterloo. Recently, I began donating to the KW Community Fridge, which is now located at the Kitchener Market, and I've seen how donations of basic necessities are used up and needed again hour after hour. A person could spend their entire day just dropping off food and never feeling the need, consistently coming back to empty fridges that need to be filled. I bring my son with me. He's 8 years old, and he sees what I see, and he asks me all the time. He says, well, how can we help? What can we do? He chooses fruit and his favorite snacks to donate to the fridge, but he knows that other things need to be done, and he pushes me as to what can be done. And so that was what inspired me to dig a little bit further and decide to come speak to you today. The anecdotal evidence of my own experience has led me to Reallocate Waterloo Region and their 5 calls to action, which I've seen referenced in other places here. And I came across a number of statistics which I know will be familiar, but I feel like are valuable to repeat. As reported by on October 28th, food bank use has never been higher in the region, 26% more use since before the pandemic. There are over 1,000 people currently homeless in Waterloo Region, which is more than triple the number since 2018, which is crazy, from 333 in 2018 to 1,085 right now. On top of this, House of Friendship having to temporarily close their shelter, which is absolutely the wrong time for that to happen. And of course, the CBC has reported on increased incidences of mental health issues in the last year, and these will no doubt continue as the real emotional toll of the pandemic begins to emerge in the months and years ahead. Women's Crisis Service of Waterloo Region is reporting an increase in the severity of issues being reported by the, on average, 272 women and 196 children who use their shelter annually, and the more than 1,000 who are accessing outreach services currently. And given these issues and all of this going on and continuing to build and grow, the Waterloo Region Police Service requested increase to their budget, in addition to ongoing renovations to the headquarters, struck me as incompatible with what is happening in the region at this moment. I'm very aware that the role of the police is complex and varied, and officers face difficult challenges throughout their work. Hardly a day goes by I don't see 1, 2, 3 police cars patrolling the neighborhood where I live, the roads along my commute, the parking lots of facilities that I use. But these pressing issues faced by the region right now, today, they just won't be solved by more police funding. Resources are needed, as we've heard already today, are needed for community groups and projects to take the pressure off the police so they can focus on the core of their job. The $185.3 million budget of the
Stephen, that's the 1 minute mark, okay? So if you can wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely. That accounts for 32% of regional property taxes, and that doesn't include the $45 million for the headquarters renovation. I'm joining with Reallocate Waterloo Region to call for the development of the Indigenous Community Hub at the Charles Street Terminal in relationship with the Indigenous community, a rejection of that proposed budget increase, the fulfillment of the region's commitment to $250,000 to facilitate community consultations and action plans for police-free community care model, allocating the value of that maximum budget increase request to community-led homelessness and housing affordability strategy, and committing $1 million to funding mental health and neurodevelopmental resources and services for Black, Indigenous, and other racialized people, 2S LGBTQIA people, persons living with disabilities, marginalized communities. Council has that authority to send that police budget back to the Police Service Board, and I would request that you can strongly consider doing that. This crisis is real and demands compassionate, courageous, and creative solutions. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak tonight, for your consideration, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I see no questions, so I'll go to the next delegation. Have a lovely evening. Gord Nicholls, with regard to the budget for River Road Extension, JRT Transit, new buses, and forest property. Are you there? There you are, Gord. Welcome, and you have 5 minutes. Please proceed.
Okay, I'm going to go to share screen, which hopefully will work. And are you seeing?
That's working, Gord.
Okay, good. Look, this evening I'm here once again, an old guy who has a lot to say, I suppose. I would like tonight to impress upon you that I'm trying to speak on behalf of my grandchildren, the young people that left Canada and went to COP26, the other young people like Sophia and Zoe and Alex and Toby, who are trying to press a case in the Supreme Court of Canada on the question of our environment. I think it's really, really important that we've got to take action. And I would like to try and point out with you with a couple of items in my PowerPoint where I think you could divert a little bit of money in order to, one, reduce CO2 emissions, and two, increase the tree coverage in the region. As you know, now this was about 8 years ago, transportation was 40% of greenhouse gases in the region. Apparently it's now 48%. That's not really a good way to be going. I think what we could do is let's concentrate on the buses. Now, you do have a budget for the buses, and it's shown in the table in this PowerPoint. And for fleet replacement in 2022, there is 34 million allocated. I would like you to transfer money from item number 07087 of 1.4 million, and from item 68030, and I've shown 2022, 23, 24. Then I hope you will go after the federal grants. The federal Liberal government is saying they want to do something. Well, why don't you ask them for $10 million for each year for the next several years in order to put your bus fleet off of gas and diesel. Anyway, I'll leave you with that chart to look at later. The second thing I hope you would consider doing, and I talked about this 2 weeks ago, we need more green space. We really do. And we need it for two reasons. One is it will absorb CO2, which will help clean the atmosphere. It emits oxygen, which even makes the atmosphere better. And it also gives a place for people to go and get some exercise. I would hope you would consider concentrating on an area that is close to the LRT line. Some of you who have been councillors for many years know that I've been on this for 16 years now. That's a long time. I'd like you to remember what Homer Watson was able to do with some business friends. It would be nice if some of the business people in the community saw that Homer Watson set an example by convincing those business people to donate the Homer Watson Park. And now it would be very nice if we could have something done with Hidden Valley, because it's only 200 acres. It's very beautiful, but there are going to be 40,000 new people, and 200 acres doesn't go very far. I did present a couple of other ideas because I think you should be prepared to set up a budget that starts buying up and guaranteeing that some of the really good lands that are along the river are going to be preserved forever and not grabbed up and developed. Finally, I think that if you take these moves, it's going to have a spin-off effect with respect to
Gordon, this is your
something that we
1 minute
learned about in the
warning,
COVID
please.
epidemic. Can you hear me? I just got a notice saying my thing is unstable. Am I still coming through?
We've been able to hear you and see your shared screen, so everything's fine from our end.
Oh, okay, good.
But you only
I
have
hope
a
it
little bit of
doesn't.
time left.
Okay, thank you. I will do my best. Anyway, I think we have to look at the question of, with 40,000 new residents going along that LRT line, where are they going to be able to go easily without having to have a car and drive a long distance? And Hidden Valley, I think, is the answer. So I've suggested on the last slide where right now you've got $0 in the budget, which is number 22006, for acquiring new green space in the region. That needs to be radically increased. And I would suggest bringing it up to around 5 million a year over the next 5 years. And then a couple of little supplements coming from these two areas here to give you a total of some $30 million to use to try and put in place green space that'll be guaranteed forever for our grandchildren, my grandchildren, your grandchildren, and all the young people who at this point I think are starting to despair because there's talk and there's no action. And you probably remember that out of the COVID thing came the little chant, blah, blah, blah. I hope Waterloo region will not be doing blah, blah, blah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gordon. I see no questions, so we're going to carry on to the next delegation. Andrew Bennett, Executive Director, Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony. Are you there? There you are, Andrew. Welcome.
I'm indeed here. Good
Please
evening,
proceed.
everybody. I'm going to share screen, if I may. Give me 1 second. I believed I was going to be, I forwarded it earlier, but I will now share a screen. Bear with me 1 second, please. Having a little technical difficulty here. Oh, it's been shared for me. Even better. Thank you, whoever's doing that. Thank you very much. Council, it's wonderful to be with you this evening. Andrew Bennett, Executive Director. Next slide, please. I'm going to briefly resume what we've been doing over the last year and look to the future. 2021, of course, was very hard, but boy, did we achieve a great deal. I just wanted to stress that there were more digital concerts from KWS than any other orchestra in Ontario, more than the Toronto Symphony, more than the National Arts Centre, more than any other. We did both monetization, and we also provided concerts free to the community, particularly family and schools concerts. KWS was acclaimed internationally for the way that it monetized. We were right at the front and one of the great achievers. And what did that get us? Next slide, please. It was so successful that we only lost 90% of our earned income. I'm just leaving that with you, Council, to realise quite how big we were brilliant at what we did, and we only managed to lose 90% of our earned income. And many in the performing arts fared even worse. That's how what the impact was on the arts of COVID. The great news is that our contributed income, that's donations and sponsorship, basically stayed with us. And thank you, Council, for being part of the solution that multi-level government support was maintained. Next slide, please. One of the big successes was the free special school digital concerts, which went into schools, entitled Mad, Sad, Glad, and presented by our former assistant conductor, Daniel Bartholomew Poisler, who many of you will know. It addressed students' emotions during the pandemic. Next slide, please. We also kept going the Bridge to Music instrumental lessons for young people from financially challenged families. And we also did something new. We provided many of our concerts free of charge to long-term care facilities under a program called Connecting Through Music. We made a difference. We made a difference to mental health. We made a difference to what was happening in across the community in many ways. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, we extended the contract for our music director, Andre Verheer, much admired across the community, and we're delighted he's going to be with us until at least 25-26. And as many people are aware, in parallel, the Conrad Centre for the Performing Arts, of which we are the stewards, was donated to the City of Kitchener. Next slide, please. So what are we doing now? This picture is from Monday night, where a very small but significant number of young people were giving their first showing just to their friends and relatives of the work they've been doing with the youth orchestra. We're back working there. We're also, in the meantime, the main orchestra is working from September through to December, producing fantastically sophisticated digital concerts. And the big news, trailed here and there, but not a secret, is that in a couple of weeks' time, we will be announcing in-person concerts at Centre and the Square, plus in our venues in Waterloo, Cambridge and Guelph. We're going to be back in public, and that's very exciting news. Next slide, please. But, and here's the big but, obviously, the huge financial challenges we're facing relate to the curtailment of the wage subsidy before our earned income is back to the former levels. We do have contingency plans, but they're not pretty.
Andrew, this is the 1-minute warning, please.
Thank you. Final slide. Thank you, Council, for being part of our solution in the last year. Thank you for maintaining support to all the arts organisations that you do support. That has been absolutely crucial. It has maintained artists' employment, so crucial in our community, and we've been able to provide a focus for joy and solace. It's going to be a very tough period, and we're going to need your ongoing help. But I wanted to say both thank you and When we go digital again for the holiday program, I hope you'll be with us to see that and to celebrate across the community all that we do. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And that was well timed as well. So I really appreciate that. We have no questions of the delegation. So once again, thank you. And I will be looking for our next delegation, who is Rachel Bailing, board member. So I hope I've said that right, for Grand Philharmonic Choir. Are you there, Rachel? There you are. Wonderful. Please proceed.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me this evening. My name is Rachel Bailing, and I'm a board member with the Grand Philharmonic Choir. My relationship with the Grand Philharmonic Choir began when I was a grade 5 student at Sotheby Public School. My music teacher at the time was Carol Giesbrecht, and she approached myself and a few other students to join the first Children's Philharmonic Choir. My mom was already a chorister with the adult choir, so I was excited to join the Philharmonic family. It changed my life. I had always loved to sing, but this brought me into the world of music, a place where I was able to sing with choristers of all ages who loved music and performance as much as I did. I was able to sing in many languages that I would never have otherwise learned. I was given the history and background of many composers, learned the proper way to use my voice, and the value of having music available to all. Singing with the KW Symphony at the Center in the Square was indeed a highlight of my life. In 2016, my daughter, Bronte, auditioned for the Grand Philharmonic Youth Choir and carried on the family tradition. So that's 3 generations of singers. The choir will be celebrating its 100th birthday in 2022. What a milestone for this community. Now would be an unfortunate time to disregard the choir's place in the rich choral history of this community. I am so impressed by the diligence, commitment, and integrity the Grand Philharmonic brings to each of its multitude of endeavors. The sound walks, where we bring music into nature, allowing audiences an experience like no other. It's wonderful to watch passers-by join in to listen, always bringing a smile to their faces. I am in awe of the children who learn the art of performance, coming to concerts prepared and bursting with excitement to share their beloved pieces with the audience. Music touches hearts and brings people together, whether it be in the woods, a concert hall, nursing home, or church. It makes a difference. As a board, we are constantly striving to be even more accessible to members of our community. Our choir family as a whole is culturally diverse and inclusive to all. Everything discussed at the board level is considered with compassion and always with the utmost concern for the well-being of our members and community. We feel we have an important role to foster and strive for excellence in all we do. I would like to share a personal story that I was given permission by my daughter to share with Mark, our artistic director, and now with you today. In November 2016, we attended a concert presented by the Chamber Choir entitled Annalise, based on the life of Anne Frank. As always, the music transported us into another world, and in this case, that of a 12-year-old girl living within closed walls at a time when she should have been experiencing the world of a preteen. As her feeling of isolation, fear, and disconnectedness crept into the music, I looked over and saw my daughter weeping. Something within the music and the words touched her soul like never before. She was overcome with emotion that days later she still spoke of, with the realization that music truly taps into a part of us that nothing else can. We all likely can agree that music has helped ease our loneliness and isolation over the past few years. Again, please reconsider the recommendation brought forward to discontinue the support of our choir. In a time where music is needed more than ever, it can help alleviate the brokenness and despair the pandemic has brought on our community. We can and we will lighten hearts and build bridges of hope as the world reopens. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming out this evening and delegating, Rachel. Much appreciated. I see no questions. I'm going to be looking for our next delegation, and the name is Victoria Hand. Victoria, are you there?
I am here, thank you.
Welcome. Wonderful to see you. You can begin, please.
Thank you very much. I'm a member of the Grand Philharmonic Choir, singing in the soprano section. I moved to Canada 5 years ago as a complete, on my own, no family, no friends coming over with me for work. I'd sung in a choir in Luxembourg before moving here. And the first thing I did when I knew my job was moving here was look up a choir to sing with, because a choir gives you community. It gives you a place, it gives you a home, and it gives you a family immediately, wherever you are in the world. Doesn't matter whether you speak the same language or not, you speak the language of music. So moving over here, I contacted the Grand Phil Choir. I had to wait a little while because I'd missed the auditions for the first year I arrived, but as soon as I could audition, I did, and I got in. And I haven't looked back. I have a wonderful family with the choir. We all reach out to each other. We all take care of each other. And this last year and a half, of course, that has been so much more important. I caught COVID right at the beginning, back in March last year. And I was scared that I would never sing again. Having music, having the constant connection with my choir friends over Zoom calls, over listening to the same music together and commenting together on Facebook as we listen to the music, sharing the music we performed in the past. That kept us connected, it kept us together, and it gave us our community when we were all stuck at home and not able to go out and see friends and family. Over time, I also had to work at getting my voice back. My lungs felt like shattered glass. My back and my muscles and everything hurt, but I worked at it. And with my singing teacher, she helped me get back to the stage where I could sing. And now we're meeting again. Distanced, yes. Wearing masks, yes. Are we frustrated with that? Of course we are. We can't wait to be back singing without masks, together, clustered on the stage and having an audience listening to us. We need this, and our community needs this. We bring joy to everybody here. We really do need that funding because the amount that we do for our whole community is amazing. Some of the other things that I've been able to do, one of the composers that won our competition a couple of years ago, he was talking to me after the performance, and I was saying, oh, well, I used to be in a choir in Luxembourg and we sing in all different languages there. And he said, oh, can you introduce me? So I did. He now keeps in touch with them. So that's a Canadian composer who now has connections in Luxembourg with the key people in the middle of the music scene there. We don't know where our limits are. We don't know where we touch, but we do know we touch people. We do know we make a difference. And we do know that we're a vital part of this community that really does have a key and an honest part here. Please, please reconsider making sure that we get a steady funding so that we can carry on all the good work that the choirs do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Much appreciated. Sorry about the hardship during COVID. Glad to hear that you found your way through it. That's terrible. We have no questions, so I'm going to proceed to the next delegation. Ella Latta Suazo. It almost sounds like a song, doesn't it? Ella, are you there? Wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
Please proceed.
Hello, counselors. Thank you so much for having me this evening. I am yet another one of the long string of people vouching for the choir. My name is Ella Latta Suazo. I'm a resident of Kitchener. I am a senior student at Wilfrid Laurier University, and I'm a past member of the Grand Philharmonic Children's and Youth Choirs, and I'm currently an assistant conductor for the Children's Choir. Obviously, you know the reason why I'm here, and I just would like to give a little bit of my story so you hear yet another account of the wonderful ways that the choir has uplifted people in this community. The Grand Philharmonic Choir is a unique organization that fosters a love of singing and builds community through its family of choirs, stretching from ages 7 through all the way through adulthood. The choir has been a vital part of my life for over a decade. I started in the children's choir. And it's also been the spark and the home for my passion of choral music and music education. The Grand Phil has provided me with relationships and mentorships of great personal significance and have been a cornerstone in my journey as a musician and a musical facilitator, and provided me with invaluable experiences through various workshops, trips, unique repertoire, and performance opportunities. I started in the children's choir as a child, and I was one who loved to sing discouraged because of my peers in music class not being as passionate about music as I was. And the choir was a place that showed me a community of other children who felt the same way about music and who loved to sing. And there I really learned the power of group singing. From my involvement in the children's choir, I gained the courage to audition for the integrated arts program at Eastwood Collegiate Institute. And then in my high school years, I sang in the youth choir, but remained in the children's choir as a volunteer. I just couldn't give it up. My involvement there as a volunteer and in the youth choir led me to study community music at Wilfrid Laurier University, where I am in my last year. The choir also graciously awarded me a $1,000 donated scholarship when I was entering university for pursuing musical studies and to help me pursue my dreams of using choral music and group singing as a way to bring people together and to interest children in music, just as the youth choir or the children's choir had done for me. I have had the pleasure of being bumped up from a volunteer with the children's choir to now the assistant conductor, which marks now my, I think, 8th year of volunteering / assistant conducting. And these 8 years have been invaluable in my development professionally and my facilitation experience with choral music and with other kids. And I think one of the best parts is that I've watched 7-year-olds grow up through the children's choir as a volunteer and then been able to sing with them in the youth choir. So that's been very, very special, watching them grow up and then being able to sing with them. The choir has always supported me and made me want to give back in the way that they so graciously brought me into their community. And I would really love to continue to be able to give the children the opportunity of the feeling of power of singing together, the opportunity to sing at Center in the Square with the KW Symphony, and the opportunity to make valuable friendships. I hope that my story exemplifies all that the Grand Phil Choir can do and has done for the community in fostering a love of music and members of all ages, as we've been hearing this evening. And I once again ask you to reconsider the budget. And thank you so much for listening and for hearing all of our accounts of the choir. And I hope you all have a great evening.
Thanks you so much, Ella. Much appreciated. I really am glad to hear the story of your youth coming up through the program. So thanks again for that. And I look to our council. We have no questions at this time. So I'll call upon our next delegation, who is Mark Vorinen. I hope I got that right. Mark, are you there? Have I
Good evening. Yes, and excellent pronunciation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you this evening. My name is Mark Vornen, and I am the artistic director of the Grand Philharmonic Choir. For 100 years since its founding in 1922, the choir has been an integral part of the cultural fabric of the region of Waterloo. I'm coming to you today first to say thank you. We are immensely grateful to the region for the annual grant that we have received as one of the region's core cultural institutions. It is a reliable and stable source of funding, allowing us to provide musical experiences and music education for up to 200 choristers and thousands of audience members each year. And second, to ask you to vote against the recommendation to cut the core funding grant that the choir receives from the region each year. To do so at this time, as we come out of an unprecedented global pandemic, would be completely destabilizing to the choir as we continue to plan for the future in uncertain times. We are a family of choirs, and we provide musical opportunities for children as young as 7, for youth in high school and university, and for adults throughout their lives. We teach musical literacy, how to read music, about music theory and about vocal technique, about music appreciation to our 200 singers. Our performances include the great works like Messiah and the Bach Passions, and these are a part of our long inherited tradition and history. But they just as often include performance experiences that help us to make sense of a complicated world, like our recent performances of Annalise, the story of Anne Frank, or considering Matthew Shepard, an oratorio about the young Wyoming student who was beaten and died because of his sexuality. We sing throughout this community to bring our song to audiences in workshops, outreach events, and free educational opportunities. To ensure that anyone can access our choir, we have a bursary program so that no one will be turned away from singing because of their inability to pay a registration fee. These are all important aspects of our programming that are supported by the core funding we receive from the region of Waterloo. The Grand Philharmonic Choir engages an artistic and administrative staff of 9 and gives opportunities through assistantships, as you have just heard from Ella, to young musicians who are just beginning a career in music. We hire both young and established Canadian soloists to perform with us on a regular basis. And importantly, we are a musical partner of the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony as we engage this other core cultural institution at least 3 times each year. The reliable core funding we receive from the region gives us a financial base that ensures we are able to support our financial commitments to our musical partners. This is all the more crucial as we emerge from the pandemic and while much uncertainty about rebuilding an audience for in-person choral events continues. As you have heard tonight from other delegates, we provide life-changing experiences for individuals who engage with us either as performers or audience members. These experiences enrich their lives, and in doing so, we enrich the cultural life of the region of Waterloo. I'm very proud to be leading this organization into its 2nd century, and I respectfully request that you help ensure a strong and stable future for the choir by voting to maintain our core funding grant. Thank you very much for listening this evening.
Thank you so much, Mark. Much appreciated this evening. I see no questions of the delegation, so I will move to the next delegation. Brendan Shura, are you there, Brendan? Hello, Brendan. You may proceed.
Hello. My name is Brendan Sherritt. I'm the past president of Kitchener-Waterloo Music Productions, a nonprofit community theater group that's been around since 1948. I'm speaking in favor of the direction of the discretionary grant and organizational report presented earlier today. I'll note that I have 2 younger children and it's close to bedtime, so I apologize if they speak out of order. KWMP, for the most part, is a self-funded organization. We have been providing residents of Waterloo region a chance to experience high-quality community theater both on and off stage, and typically produce 2 to 3 musicals per year. We endeavor to make our shows affordable, entertaining, inclusive, while providing training for the next generation. Our membership and audience is a cross-section of Waterloo region. We also operate a community arts center located at 14 Shaftesbury Drive in Kitchener. This art center provides affordable rehearsal and performance space for many local arts groups. This art center is also funded through ticket sales of our shows. This has meant that we have had to produce large blockbuster musicals in order to ensure that we have the funding to pay property tax, utilities, and other operation costs. We have been able to access funding through Arts Fund for some shows, some of our shows when needed, but we've not had success accessing funding for the ongoing operation costs of this facility through the current granting program. We do provide an impact to this community. As you know, there is a real need for affordable rehearsal and performance space in this region, which has been identified by all regions, all levels of government, and arts groups across the region. Last year, we received a $20,000 funding from the KW Community Foundation to create a pay-what-you-can program in order to address the needs, these issues. This funding allowed us to provide subsidized space for local arts groups recovering from COVID-19. The number and variety of requests that we received through this program blew us away, with the majority of these groups being able to provide 50% or more of the posted rental rate, and some even offering to pay above the posted rental rate in order to support other groups. This relatively small investment has had an outsized impact on our arts community. Groups are able to rehearse in a safe and clean and reliable space. KWMP can produce shows without having to worry that we'll sell enough tickets in order to pay for the operating costs of our facility. We believe that regional staff should be able to set new guidelines for funding for groups like ours and many others to access funding that can truly make a difference in our community. We do, however, believe that the funding guidelines should apply to all organizations in a transparent, equitable, and purposeful manner. In 2015, staff set criteria for what it means to be a key cultural institution, which identified 4 institutions, 2 of which are directly funded by the region. The region of Waterloo provides more direct funding for these key cultural institutions than the rest of the arts community combined. The numbers only increase when you include in-kind funding that these organizations receive. Now, I'm not trying to tear down these groups. They do amazing work. And too often the arts community is called eating each other. These groups do great work and we will continue to partner with them. But the funding that they receive is based on historical agreements, not transparent. The cost of running the facilities that benefits the community does need to be taken into account. The Waterloo region, we're known as a startup community. We build on things that work. I ask you, what would groups like Globe Studios, Drayton Entertainment, the Registry Theatre, Cambridge Symphony, and KWMP be able to do if we receive similar levels of support?
That's your 1 minute, Brendan.
We encourage regional council to direct staff to reevaluate all funding, grant funding, through the criteria laid out in the report to ensure that all funding is robust, transparent, equitable, purposeful, and meets the needs of our growing and diverse community and supports the region's strategic objectives. Thank you all for your time. I know it's been a long night, and I invite you to tour the KW Community Arts Center whenever you'd like. Thank you very much.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you, Brendan. Much appreciated. And I see no questions, so I'm going to move to our next delegation. The delegations are our late bloomers, we'll call them, and so they have 3 minutes. The first delegation I'm looking for is Neil Taylor. Neil, are you there? Wonderful. Please proceed.
My name is Neil E. Taylor. I live at 1016A Wilson Avenue, Kitchener. I'm present to represent the interest of nature and, in particular, the natural biodiversity that exists in Hidden Valley. I'm no stranger to the region with respect to Hidden Valley. I appeared before council and wrote numerous letters to staff and council for over 2 decades. This resulted in the region undertaking 2 years of additional environmental studies. I continue to appreciate that decision. As a result, significant changes were made to the South Kitchener Transportation Corridor. I have never been convinced that the River Road, Bleams Road link would solve traffic congestions, given that number 8 used to become a parking lot for hours each day before COVID-19. Traffic conditions, like many things, have drastically changed since the onset of the pandemic. Experts state that living conditions will never return as they were. So many work from home. So many more are shopping online. Accordingly, a new traffic study is merited to determine the real needs in the South Kitchener area and should be done before any more money is spent and wasted on the project. I support staff and others in removing all line items pertaining to expenditures on the River Road extension in this current budget. On a different topic, I urge the region to develop a new line of expenditure that could be considered Natural Disaster Contingency Fund. Given the natural disasters that have occurred worldwide, and in particular in BC, and as I speak in the Maritimes right now, this concept has significant merit. Hurricane Hazel was considered a once in a 100-year event. 100-year events are now recalibrated to less than 20 years. Hurricanes have become stronger and unpredictable. Downtown Waterloo is
Neil,
on
there's
a
your 1 minute warning, please.
Municipalities in BC are at wit's end to come up with the money that is needed now. I commend this to your urgent attention and implementation. It is shameful that I can find no line item that speaks to the acquisition of lands that would become green space. Hidden Valley and other lands should be acquired immediately in cooperation with lower levels of government. I support the proposals of Gord, Nicholls, and Mr. Trueman that spoke earlier tonight and adopt them as my own. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Neil. Much appreciated. I see no questions. I'm going to call upon Michelle Knight. Are you there, Michelle? Are you in the Zoom?
I am in the Zoom.
Wonderful.
Just needed to find my buttons. Hello.
Hello. Please proceed, Michelle.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for having me here tonight, and good evening. My name is Michelle Knight. I'm an eviction prevention peer support worker with Social Development Center Waterloo Region. Eviction Prevention Waterloo Region started in May 2021 in direct response to the need in the community. More residents are facing evictions in this unprecedented time. Peer support during these crucial times works with tenants in their most stressful moments. It is intensive, it is emotional, it is time demanding. The support we are providing can and does last hours at a time and months at a time for each individual tenant situation. We help people access LTB hearings as peer support. We help tenants connect with their community services and work with to support tenants together. This working relationship with other agencies and organizations allows people to be supported in different ways and helps fill the gaps in the chain of services. As of October 2021, eviction prevention, both KW and Cambridge, supported 60 households. Of those households, over 30 of them were families with children, for a total of 133 individuals living in these households. The total number of evictions prevention is 11 to date. Our support is attuned to BIPOC and LGBTQ plus communities, and many people fall into multiple underserved demographics. 44 households are experiencing poverty. 20 of the 60 households are people of color, 7 households were newcomers, and 3 were LGBTQ plus. In a number of cases, Eviction Prevention Cambridge was working jointly with Eviction Prevention KW to support neighborhoods who are facing issues of unsafe and unsanitary living conditions, landlords not completing or ignoring requests for repairs, mostly expecting the tenant will leave and rent will increase. Most of these tenants are facing multiple issues besides threat of eviction, including not speaking the language or understanding the systems. In August, I was able to support a tenant who was given an eviction notice from the Landlord-Tenant Board. This tenant was dealing with many challenges and barriers, such as mental health, anxiety, needing supportive housing, living on a fixed income, all of which contribute to—
There's your 1 minute warning, Michelle, sorry.
Pardon?
That's your 1 minute warning.
Okay, sorry, which contributed to them not being able to fully participate in the proceedings before them. There were days where we spent hours together as we had to make connections to other organizations, help facilitate the exchange of documents and forms. At one point, I accompanied the tenant to the food bank because the overwhelming anxiety was deterring that for them. With the evictions prevented through the mediation with landlords, support to LDB hearings, and collaboration with property standards, as well as community legal services, we prevent more people becoming homeless and at the same time prevent further loss of affordable housing. Our ask to you, after conversations with the City of Cambridge and Kitchener, as eviction prevention work is seen within the regional government mandate, we ask you to include an additional full-time eviction prevention peer support position with SDC within the staff proposal, to increase funding for prevention of homelessness, to ensure low-income and underserved residents can keep their homes. We are currently only 2 part-time peer workers in the 3 cities. The need is far greater than the capacity. Our request is $57,000. As a final thought,
Oh dear. Technology? Okay. So, anybody got any suggestions?
Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. Much appreciated. I see no questions, so I think at this particular point in time, I'm looking for our final delegation. Chris Clark? Chris, are you in the Zoom?
Yep,
Thank you.
I'm right here.
Okay, Chris, please proceed. You have 5 minutes, and I'll give you a 1 minute warning, okay? Sorry,
Okay, thank you.
3 minutes. Sorry, Chris, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Chris Clark. I'm new to Kitchener-Waterloo, but I'm involved in a small group called Ground Up, which has encouraged me and given me the knowledge to be able to participate tonight, so I'm grateful for that. I'm also the director of coaching at a local organization that introduces and trains 3 to 8-year-olds in soccer. When I was an undergrad, I started an after-school athletics drop-in in an at-risk neighborhood in Toronto. At the time, I was reading about social determinants of health and about other social studies and ideas that were relating to the health of children and youth. One thing that stood out to me was research that found that participation in physically embodied extracurricular activities like sports, dance, drama, music, and other similar activities was a greater predictor of avoiding teen pregnancy and the abuse of alcohol and drugs amongst high schoolers than any other category. More than income level, more than having two parents at home, more than racial factors. It's pretty incredible. The relevance of this to our time, especially in light of the recent push to reduce funding for the police, is that we should be using some of these funds to ensure that those without traditional paid access to extracurriculars get that access. These are children in poverty, children of single parents, and children that are Indigenous or other visible minorities. Housing, mental health supports, and addiction supports. These are of utmost importance. But as Rachel J. and Elizabeth R. pointed out earlier in this session, we must use both reactive and preventative strategies. Additionally, and on a related note, I have learned about the proposal to use the Old Charles Street Terminal as an Indigenous community hub. I've been very impressed with many aspects of the municipality and the region since I've been here, but the lack of space for our Indigenous neighbors and friends is frankly a major oversight. If reconciliation is in fact one of our primary goals in this time, which it very much should be, then we must provide the space for our Indigenous neighbors to gather, play, dance, sing, study, rediscover, and recreate the culture that our institutions and ancestors have dismantled and destroyed, or we are equally culpable in the genocide for our own inaction. That's all.
Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate you coming and delegating in the Zoom room this evening. We've had no other delegations during the meeting, so we'll proceed with the agenda. We have received a number of pieces of correspondence that were included with the agenda. Anything that was received by the clerk's office after the agenda was circulated were given to us by email prior to the meeting and will be attached to the minutes. That being said, is there any other business? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. So who would like to make that? Councillor Foxton, and seconded by Councillor Kiefer. All those in favor, please use your green buttons. And that is carried. Thank you so much, everyone, for indulging us in a very long evening. And as you're well aware, the next meeting times have been stated earlier. So we'll see you again soon. Thanks.